Amazing. Well, I'm so excited that you're here to chat. And before we dive in and introduce you to everybody, I thought, like we talked about, it could be interesting to share with everybody. This is actually our second time having this conversation.
Mhm.
And we, had our first, for some background, I'll let Tori get into it. We've known each other for a long time, but are reconnected kind of recently and thought we could just like have the authenticity conversation and post it like a lot of my other ones. But about 2 minutes into my re-listening to it, I kind of thought, oh, wait a minute. Like, I'm not sure this is for everyone. I think this was a friend catch up. And so yeah, I before we get into like the shared background of it all and your story, I'd love to just hear like what your of course your very gracious response was to doing it again and sort of your thoughts on like how we came to that decision of like how transparent we wanted to be with certain things.
Yeah, I actually really appreciated that from you because we recorded that conversation in early January. Because I remember my
Yeah. Or like late December, because you know what? Both our creek were still up. Like I will share that. So it felt very holiday still to me.
but I think probably because we knew each other from acting class, so there is a level of like being really personal and getting really deep really quickly because
Yeah.
isn't that sort of like the acting class way because you're mining yourself for
Hmm.
material essentially. But you had messaged me and you were like, man, there's just a lot of personal stuff that we got into mixed in with general ideas of authenticity. And I think you're just pretty much like, out of respect, let's re-record the conversation because maybe you don't want everything out there all the time, which I thought, yes, amazing. And then that just makes me feel more safe with you in general, that like an idea of privacy is respected. And especially like in the age of like blogging and putting your whole life out there and monetizing it. And it's almost like we flipped into it's more valuable to keep things to yourself, to have
Exactly.
better words and your friends too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. I'm so glad. And like that safe space is literally all that I want. And I think such a big difference I really find with, having conversations as friends who like will know certain things about each other and like we're going on this road and like, oh, I know that this part of the story also includes this, just not mentioning that because that's her prerogative and that's a choice.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like in a way we had to have that first conversation to sort of see and learn where the personal boundaries were because I was also taking a gamble and I was kind of just thinking like maybe she just is okay with this, but like I don't want to make that choice for you. And so
Really.
I think that, yeah, that just comes into like authenticity and transparency really being personal for everyone. But that
Mhm.
doesn't make total sense. But I just think like someone else's version of authenticity might be full disclosure and full transparency all the time. But I think that more often than not, that is not the case. And it's often what's modeled in the media, which I don't always appreciate. And so I just think that the idea that authenticity means I'm going to be all of myself with you all the time, like, does not mean that I owe you all parts of me. We're
Mhm.
still gonna have like I'm still so excited to have an authentic conversation about all these things and like some of our lives will come up, but just because you came on does not mean I am entitled to share personal details about you with everyone. And just I have a blog and subscribers that I love, it does not mean that I now owe them all the information about my life because what we owe the most is to ourselves.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. So I just love that I almost like that it happened this way because we got to have a great conversation. That will still be part of the conversation in a lot of ways, but also just yeah, learn something about that. So yeah, on that note, it's like always hard because like I know the things. I'm like, what do people not know? I would love, like, similar to last time, and whatever way you want, to talk about your story a little bit and how you got here. And, we can talk a little bit about our shared background and like where, like, the point in your journey where, like, I come in a little bit, and then like how we get to here, sort of again too, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. So I guess the long and the short of it is I was a professional dancer, and most notably, I was a Radio City Rockette for 10 seasons.
Yeah.
During that, I got my Pilates and yoga certification, and then I studied acting because my trajectory for myself was right after dance, I would just become a working actor. And for a while, a little bit was when I was ready to retire from dance, I was sort of waiting to book a bigger acting job before I gave myself permission to do that because I just wanted something else to, like, another stepping stone, basically. And that didn't happen. I had to let go of dance first, and then I continued to pursue acting, and I did plays and improv and all that kind of stuff. And we met in an acting class. Was it
Yeah.
Martin Haber?
Yes. And it's so interesting hearing you tell it sort of this way too, because I think that we must have met like right at this kind of junction, like of this like transition happening for you. Because I remember Margie Haber was in LA and you were living out west at the time, and
Yeah.
I was in New York. But there definitely was like a season. I think you did one more season of dance maybe after that, because we tried to hang out, but we never got to when you were in New York, like after that.
What
Yeah.
year was that? Do you remember the
I
Margie?
do. I do, because I was soft. Oh my God. Yeah. I'm like saying like, of course, everyone knows my age, but like, it was between sophomore and junior year of college for me. So I think it was 2014, 2015. I think 2015.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Then that's right on. Because my last season was 2016, and I had been going back and forth from LA to New York, hoping
Yes, I
to,
remember that. Yeah.
yeah, hoping to transition more into LA, hoping to get more acting work, and um, it just didn't shake out that way. And
Yeah.
basically when I retired from dance, I had dislocated my arm and had just a bunch of injuries through that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it was not an easy transition. So basically, I had to just have this moment of free falling, sort of without an identity, and also having to figure out how to make money because Rockette's contracts, it's a livable wage as a dancer, it's health insurance,
Mm-hmm.
retirement planning, like there's just a lot that a lot to let go of, a lot of security to let go of, basically. And then
Yeah.
just be like, all right, well, I'm going to give this thing over here a big go. And so I basically started teaching Pilates reformer classes as a way to survive in Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, COVID happens, and I ended up at the time temporarily moving in with my boyfriend who's a director, and we made a short film, and we did it just for the love of it, and that film ended up going to festivals and winning some awards, and it was a really, like, probably the most, like, proud acting moment where I was like, oh, I get to like really show my stuff. and
Yeah.
and that was the thing that we made. It wasn't somebody gave me permission to do that job. Somebody
Mm-hmm.
plucked me out of obscurity to choose me. They
Yeah.
didn't see that I had, however many followers on social media, which I don't. I'm not good at social media. Um,
I think you're pretty good. Like I think you're pretty consistent. I feel like that's unfair. You also have that whole challenge in December will link. Like I think you're pretty good.
Thank you, love. But anyway, yeah, so I did that. I did the festival circuit, and I was like, okay, I'm good.
Hmm.
Because coming out of COVID, I think I was reading in the notes from before, coming out of COVID, it was like, well, I have this opportunity to come out and be whoever I want to be after this.
Yeah.
It didn't look anything like it looked before COVID.
Hmm.
I ended up permanently moving in with my boyfriend, giving up my apartment. Now I'm living outside of Hollywood. Now I have love and safety and security. And, going to those networking events for acting and stuff is just like an absolute, it's my worst nightmare.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Somebody asked me if I missed acting. I don't know. People got asking me a lot about acting lately. And I'm like, if you gave me everyone I like who's an actor and the right money and a great script, and we just did it like for one night, sure.
Yeah.
Like, we still love theater. I think people like mishear that, like when people don't act anymore. Like,
Yeah.
if there's a chance for us to like do a cool 2 woman show, like absolutely, let's do that. But the lifestyle of being a working actor, like I was thinking about that when you're talking about being a Rockette. Like, I feel like some people listening to this might not even know about like the ins and outs and the health insurance and security and like what a stable job that is too.
Yeah.
So like the ins and outs of like what you see on stage, it's very cliche versus like what that person's life is, you know?
Yeah, totally. Well, and
Yeah.
also because as an audience member, when you're watching performances and performers, it's through your own lens. You're putting
Mm-hmm.
what you're feeling on them, how you feel on them. It's not necessarily taking in them and who they are. There's just no way to. I mean, there are moments of, especially with Rockettes, particularly because that is so um almost archetypal, almost
Yeah.
like cartoony, where it's
Right.
the happy all-American women.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, there's so much going on, but as an audience, you don't want to know that. Like you came to see the show to escape all that.
Right. Yeah. I like, and I want to talk about that, like, in the lens of authenticity a little bit, because what you just said, like, I feel like that it's not even a question, but like, talk about that in the lens of authenticity. I feel because there's so many threads I feel like I could weave together, like, between like how we see ourselves and like how we see others, the lens of ourselves, and just the idea of, yeah, like how we go to the theater to escape and really are not like, not even in a bad way, like seeing these people in front
Oh.
of us as the people with the lives and lived histories. I
Mhm.
always joke to people, but I feel like it makes much more sense now in this conversation. I saw Wicked when I was 8, and I
Mm.
did not like formally like just like register, which is so embarrassing, that Idina Menzel was like a real person until much later in my life. Because to me, like teen, middle school, because to me, she was Alphaba.
Yeah.
That is who she is. So like I had a brain, I understand, but like I was not thinking about her going home at night and taking off the green. I'm like, no, she is off the throb. So yeah, as you're talking, I'm thinking about the Rockettes and like, because I'm an actor, like we go to the theater differently. So like we're not the average audience goer. Like I am thinking these things through, but it's very hard even in the Rocket show to kind of tell different girls apart and like really like look, they're not, the show is not designed for that. It's designed to make you like, and as the actor, you're also like, the purpose is the escape into this story that we're all telling. And
Yeah.
that, yeah. So that's not really a question, but I just like,
No,
I,
no,
it
no,
like clicked.
totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it is interesting because yeah, you're right. You wouldn't like go to see the Rockettes and think like, oh, those girls have health insurance this year.
I hope we're so glad to hear it. We love health insurance. Yes.
But, but that's the gig. I mean, especially with the Rockette gig, like I would say vulnerability in that sort of working environment
Mm-hmm.
isn't an asset. It's a hindrance.
Hmm.
And not. You have to be so tough. Like you have to have the callus on. Like you have to be prepared to hear some really like sometimes like straight up mean things
Mm,
said about you.
uh,
And I do think that is a skill worth developing though. I
mm,
do actually think that that's important to be able to put your shit aside and be like, okay, well, I have a job to do. And this
right.
family that spent $600 on tickets and waited all year to see this show, I'm going to give them a good show. I can't
Yeah,
like, stand on stage and cry because, I have 3 hours of sleep and my legs hurt. Like, I
right.
that it is a good skill to be like, all right, I understand I'm feeling this, but the job is not about that.
Yeah. And like vulnerability and authenticity are like intrinsically linked to me for this reason. Like, first of all, the Rockettes, you're also like the authenticity is not there because you have to like be the same. Like, that's the thing that's
Yeah,
like moving to
exactly.
me. Like, y'all are like moving like the kit, like the same, the precision. Like when you watch the really like everything is very cool, but I love like the really cool falls that happen. And
Yeah.
like it's so precise. Whereas unlike like in a theater for other things where you like are trying to kind of bring authenticity, like you are like here to
Mhm.
fit into this line literally and
Yeah.
like put your feelings aside and enjoy the show literally. And then I'm thinking about how well that description would fit a lot of people who are not Rockettes or not actors who are just doing that every day as a status quo,
Mm.
like not turning it off. Like,
Mm.
okay, doing this theater, and that's fine. I do agree there are times to like put your feelings aside, or like I have to get through this like really important meeting, or like I talk to people about sometimes inauthenticity will get us to authenticity. Like I have to act this way, get this thing done, sure. But then the idea of like never taking off that veil and
Uh,
that becomes yeah.
yeah. And I think there's a reason why a lot of performers have issues with alcohol and
Uh,
substances because I
yeah.
think that's sort of like the attempt or the backdoor way to return to being a human being. And I actually had an acting teacher at a different studio than Margie Haber. I can't remember the name of the studio now. And it was right before I left to do a Rocket contract, and I had just had breakthroughs with vulnerability and, going through these layers and finally finding my footing, feeling like I found my footing with acting. And then I'm like, and then I have to go be a Rocket, which is one big callus. And he just said exactly what you said. He was like, well, but you also have to take that costume, quote unquote, off.
Mm,
You have to have a space at night or after the show where you take that mask, that performance off, and you just get to be yourself. A
yeah.
lot of times when I was doing Rockettes, very rarely, especially as I got older, would I'd do so little socializing because for me as an introvert, that felt like keeping the performance mask on, where
Mm,
like I would spend a
mm,
lot of time walking the streets of New York alone, doing a ton of solo activities, being in my apartment alone just because I needed that space
yeah.
to balance the performance with taking off the mask. Like you need that. And that I didn't understand for years and years and years and years because
Mm,
I'm doing this job and I'm happy. And then I'd come home and be like, why am I depressed?
mm,
Like, why am I depressed? I'm performing
yeah.
and making money. I like, what is this? And I think it was from not having a space to be authentic, not carving out that
Mm.
time to fill the well,
To feel what?
to like fill the well.
Feel the wow. Yeah. Yeah. Oh my God. Absolutely. Like, don't love that, but I love how you said that. I was talking to I talked to some therapists started this series about psychological like benefits and like reverse authenticity, and like how inauthenticity, like it literally does affect our health and our mental health. Like we
Mm,
walk around thinking we're fine. I described it like I'm making money, I'm a rockette, it's like all great, but
yeah.
like I'm not well. And
Yes.
of course your injuries come. And so yeah, if you can like, I was going to literally ask you, answer the questions, you can go back and like talk to your younger self and like what was going on. It's like, yeah, there was not a space to do that. Like, and it sounds like being alone like helped come close to that. But was there anything else like in that period that helped bring you to our authentic self? Or like, because we talked about, you know, being able to shut things off and like go in and do the job being a skill to some extent, but like only as much as you can kind of shed it and like come back to yourself. Like, are
Yeah.
there like tools you wished you'd had back then, or like things you could would do if you like were doing that now?
Well, one thing that helped uh was having authentic connection
Hmm.
and authentic friendships.
Yeah.
And like I said, I really just like admired and respected all of the women I work with. Like they're incredible. But it is not possible to have an authentic connection with 79 other women.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I made sure I was always kind to everybody, but I would have maybe one or two friendships that I could be more myself with. And I
Yeah.
think that just to have friendships where you can be, I want to say like uglier with.
I totally hear you. Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
not so poised, not so perfect, um, not so like polite isn't the right word, but I think you
Mm-hmm.
understand what I'm
I
saying.
do. No, it's
Yeah.
really, it's funny. I think of it as a friend you literally can text like the things that you probably shouldn't tell anybody. It's just
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
this is disgusting, and like I can't even believe I'm going through this, but we have to talk about this. And
Yeah.
then oh,
Yeah.
there's gonna be no judgment. Yeah.
Yeah. And you can only have like one or two of those, or at least I can. Um, I didn't have like a good boyfriend relationship at the time. I know a lot of the women are married, and I'm sure they had a level of that when they went home to their families. But I would have a few friends that had lived in New York and weren't in this show in particular, or I would have like one or two friends in the cast. And a lot of the women did it, and we called it our show wife.
Mhm.
Where
Yeah.
I had one friend, and after shows, we would do something we called having a coffee and a sweet, where we would go get a coffee and a pastry and just like hash it out.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that helps take the mask off is like good, authentic friendships. And then, of course, once those people retire before you do, it's just devastating.
Yeah. Yeah. Because there's the being alone and taking the mask off, but also like taking the mask off and being around people who are like, yeah, I'm here for the not perfect shiny you, like the not high kicking you. I'm just here for like the 15th copy of the day you.
Yeah, and you know what else is really helpful now that I'm thinking about it? I went to MoMA quite a bit
Ooh, yeah, yeah.
and walked to Radio City from there.
You
I
can. That's so
love-
true.
I loved it.
Yeah.
Oh man, just being around art. I can't think of it now because it's been too many years. It's not called Boys Town anymore, is it? Or
Where are you thinking? What are we talking about?
talking about like the large indoor mall that's
Um, like like in Chelsea? Chelsea
in
Market?
Chelsea. Yes, yes, yes,
Yes,
Chelsea
yes, yes, yes.
Market.
Yes.
Yes. That just being around creative people and art. Um there was one thing at MoMA that just absolutely like let me take all my walls down. And it
Mhm.
was I think this guy made it in the 80s during the AIDS epidemic. And basically, like you come and you sit in a room and there's a projector in the center, and you're in this dark room and the shadows are chasing each other and almost hugging, almost embracing. And then these bodies move through each other. And then when you read about it, these are the shadows of bodies that eventually ended up succumbing to the AIDS epidemic, as did the artist. So it was just like the music and the darkness and
Um,
people not quite connecting in. I would just sit in there and like weep.
yeah.
And then I go to Radio City, put on my red lip, and then I was ready to go.
Incredible. All we need. No, I totally could weave just like, I want to read more about this. I love things like that. What
Why?
an image
Dude,
though.
yeah,
Like just crying in the MoMA and then just putting on the red lip and like
yeah,
iconic.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
cool.
It's
Yeah,
both. No,
yeah.
it's literally both. It's like, yeah. Oh, I could go so many places. I love this. So many ways. Um, I'm looking at so many really good quotes from our first conversation. One is popping to mind, or two I can kind of put together. He said, even though I'm not dancing anymore, thank God I danced then.
Mhm.
I don't miss it because it was lived, it was experienced. There is no stone left unturned, no grasping. I can let it go.
Mhm.
Talk to me about that.
Yeah. Well, because I get asked probably once a day still if I miss
Once a
dancing.
day.
Yeah, because
No.
enough clients at work will never inevitably find out that I was a Rockette. And they're like, well, do you miss it?
Yeah.
Do you want to be back
Yeah.
there? And I'm like, well, first of all, I'm 39. I live physically. But yeah, I just think things that are fully lived and fully experienced and fully realized are easier to let go of.
Yeah.
Then I think there was also like I can't remember her name, but there was a famous dancer that I knew through another friend, and she said the exact same thing. She was in all these old Hollywood movies, and everybody was like, "Do you miss it?" And she always just said, "No. How can
Mhm.
you miss something that is like, I don't know, a succinct way of putting it. When something is really fully realized and experienced, it's so much easier to let go.
Mm.
Because the one constant, of course, is change. It just is. That we aren't meant to have something forever. And I know that you wrote down the Osho quote of a mother, a kid in the mother's womb for longer than 9 months. The kid dies, the mother dies. I kind of felt that way about dance. I just felt like I'm not evolving as a human. I'm living the same life over and over again, expecting something new to happen, expecting to
Um,
be rescued from it. I totally thought, if I work hard in acting, if I do all the right things, acting will rescue me from dance. Do you know
oh,
what I mean?
oh,
That's the next,
yeah.
because dance
Yeah.
rescued me from like you wrote a book about being in your early 20s.
Mhm.
Dance gave me an identity and a purpose. It
Mhm.
rescued me from like uncertainty and depression. It's like, here you are. Here's a paycheck. This is you.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. No, absolutely. That feeling of like wanting to be rescued, I relate to just so deeply throughout my 20s, like something that I definitely have written about craving for romantic relationships. And I think like the idea of that leap, I was thinking about just the other day. Like, okay, like it's like leaving any kind of job. Like, of course, like you want something else, like in any kind of transition. It's like you want to know where you're living next. You want to know where you're like happening next. Um, but that didn't happen for you with dance the way you wanted it to. And I think it's always like one thing I say in the book that I love so much, like when people are like open with that kind of part of their story, not just like I did this, I did that, and it was great, and you can too. Like when I look at somebody who's like in my mind has their life together and they're so vulnerable about a time when it didn't like have that cohesiveness, that just makes me feel so seen because I think it's inside of those moments sometimes that we end up finding something different than we could have planned.
Yeah. And also, like, in retrospect, there's a lot of like, oh God, thank God I didn't get that.
Mm,
But there's also a why did I need that?
ooh,
Need that. Like what was missing within me? Or why couldn't I have given myself the appreciation and attention that I was seeking from an audience? Do you know what I mean? Like I've talked about this with a lot of other people somewhere in the industry of like, why do you need this?
yeah,
What is it giving you that
yeah,
you're not giving yourself?
yeah,
Those two things I like think about a lot of because I really like I loved acting and I am so grateful that I had the opportunity to study it at the level that I did because there is so much to have studied acting that just makes you a better, more empathetic human.
yeah, 1,000,000%.
Like
Yeah.
the art itself, like I'm not even talking about self-promotion. I'm not talking about like any of that. Like the core of the art of acting. I'm
Yeah.
so grateful that I got to at least study and experience because it changes you and it changes like how you think about your own story and other people's stories.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it gives you those skill sets of like it gives you those skill sets of times where you can't necessarily have the adult tantrum that you so badly want to have inside. You have to like pull up, be an adult, and then go home.
Yeah. I remember the time, senior year of college, I guess after we had met at Margie Haber, I did a comedy class where I think I allowed myself to be the most free I had really been in an acting class. Because, you know, like there are people who walk into acting class like ready to go. And then
Yeah.
some people who are like, oh, I'm not sure I'm ready for this yet. I think
Yeah.
that's like more of the latter and trying to like blossom a little bit into like that freedom you sort of need, like to just go crazy. And we were doing some kind of like historical comedy situation with something. We'd give me an exercise. And my friend and I chose this scene, and I can't remember the specifics, but I ended up like just hysterically like pretending to cry.
Mhm.
And I did this whole thing, and we had different jugs of like water bottles and water. And to like perform the crying, I like would pour it over myself like over and over again. And I remember afterwards just thinking, wow, like that was kind of great. Like that was fun in a way.
It's so cathartic.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my God. I just like, there's so much that I'm gonna have to just like think through and text you later about with the idea of like, why did I need that? And what did
Yeah.
I not like have to give to myself? Because with acting, it's so clear to me like how much both of us like still there's one part of it that's like, do you still miss it? Are you going to act? And there's part of it that's like, well, no, I'm not doing it. But like, this is still a part of my DNA in these ways.
Ah.
And just that question of like, what did I need? What did I think I needed that I could get? Because really, you're not getting what you think you are from an audience ever. Then wasn't inside of myself. And it just takes me back to like so many audition rooms and like opening nights and classes where I just felt like my life depended on it.
Oh yeah.
And like we can laugh about it now, but
Yeah.
I
No, yeah.
remember like I think I remember that class like in LA with like scary clarity because it was my first on camera class, and I expected to be amazing at it because in New York we are all told theater makes you good, like
Yeah,
it
yeah.
makes you famous. I thought I was gonna be the hottest shit ever. And I know I did this one scene I thought was so great, and it just clearly was not. And I did such an insane amount of preparation for our final presentation in that class.
Uh,
Like I felt that it was like the most important thing I ever done in my life.
oh, totally.
Yeah. And it was less about like proving it to myself was great and all, but I don't look back and I don't really remember. Like I kind of remember walking out of the room because like the structure was like us taping like the things, but it was more when everybody else watched it and like everybody else laughing at me and everybody else like asking what I'd done. Like that felt better to me than
Yeah.
whatever I thought of me. Like if you had asked me, what do you think of your performance? I would have been like, well, did you like it? Do you hate it? Is that a trick question? Like what's going on here? So I think like, yeah, like it feels simplistic, but there's so much there about external and internal validation.
Totally. And also needing it, like
Mhm.
needing it, needing people to like you, needing people to
Yeah,
pick you.
yeah,
Like, ah, I was such a bad auditioner because there was so much pressure on it.
yeah.
All those dumb, like one or two liners of like, can I take your order? Like,
Yeah,
it was
yeah,
like choking. I was such a bad auditioner.
no.
Like it was just, yeah, I wanted it so bad. I had so much anxiety. And of course,
Yeah.
the people that could go in and sort of like quote unquote, throw it away or whatever, would always book the job.
Yeah, and just that too. Like I hadn't thought about this in years, but it's like it's so fun, but also like wild talking to like former actors because I was just listening to something like this is so dramatic. Listening to a podcast about PTSD last night. Actually, it was the Glennon Doyle podcast I did with Brittany Griner about her new
Oh,
book.
nice. Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And they're talking about how a common symptom of like PTSD is that you'll go back and like look at sometimes the thing that you were immersed in a torture. Like she like sometimes like she went through her face just like looking at images and like just on the penal colonies because she like just was kind of fascinated. And her therapist or counselor was like, yeah, that's very common because it's almost like you're trying to convince yourself it was real. Like you
Mm.
need evidence. Like that's what support groups are for. Like
Mm.
you need to remember that it was real. Like I didn't make this up.
Oh,
And
wow. Yeah.
like, of course, I'm talking about this in the level of just like all trauma and PTSD and complex. I'm by no means comparing anything in any way, but when you just said the thing about throwing it away, I remembered like, oh yeah, they would say after an audition, like literally throw your sides out, just like forget this thing that you really care about and really freaking hope you get. But that like there was a moment of just like, oh my God, yeah, I remember that. That like I feel like my soul like didn't know I needed today. And it's just wild that you walk around with this whole part of your life and experience that like a lot of people can really do, of course, but like the immediate people around you can't always because you've gone through this very distinct experience that comes from like the performance worlds.
Yeah. And what was interesting as well is like the things that made me good and successful as a professional dancers were also things that were not good for me as an actor.
Yeah.
Like being a dancer, like what do you want me to look like? What weight do you want me to be? What's the choreography? I'm going to make it good. What do you want me to look like? I will do exactly what you say. Whereas like, especially acting in Los Angeles, where it was like, and they want you to bring yourself into it, into the role, at least to stand out amongst the thousands of other blondes, for example.
Right.
I still was so much in that people pleasing thing of like, well, I want to do it how you want me to do it. Just tell me how you want me to do it and I'll do it.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Like nobody needs that energy.
No, it's like be yourself, but the way that I want you to be yourself.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah. And then like, which
Yeah.
self? Like,
Yeah.
which sauce would you like today?
And then I go into like a Rockette pose. Like, what do you
No, like, yeah, what do you want to order? Like, which Torrie would you like?
want? Yeah, and like, people casting like feel that level of like desperation, anxiety, and like they don't need that. They're under
No.
their own pressure.
Yeah, they're in there. That's one thing I loved. One of my favorite realizations that has carried into like real life outside of theaters in real life is like the casting director, agent, whoever's in the room, like they want you to be the person for this job so bad. Like I used to walk into the audition rooms and I would think everybody hates me in here. Everybody wants to judge me. Everyone wants you to get out of here. It's like the minute I was like told no, because if you are the right person for this role, they get to go home.
Yeah.
And like I cast my senior play and I was so excited to be behind the chair instead of like on stage for the first time. But after like the first 10 people, the novelty was gone.
I
And I
know.
was just like it was so much more exciting to want them to be the one than to just be like, who wants to do that? Like nobody is here to just like watch a bunch of actors do random monologues. Like they're doing a job too. So it was a different part of the ecosystem to think about.
Yeah, oh, totally. Performers get very much like in their own head and in their own way. Like, even doing Rockettes, like it was tough. Like that was a tough gig. And the directors and the dance captains were really tough. And looking back now, I'm like, dang, they were under so much pressure. Two of our female directors had gotten breast cancer. Like that's the amount of like constant pressure that they were under. And it's like you don't think about that. You don't think about that when you're like mad that they told you you were fat or something like that, you know. But they have somebody like stepping on them as well.
It's a whole system. Yeah, it's like that the person that's like causing you stress. And I mean, more than stress with the weight shaming and all of that. And we'll get into body stuff soon. But like someone's like breathing down their necks too. Like it's
Yeah.
a whole system.
Yeah.
Yeah. You also said like there's two more things I want to get into as we like and like so everyone knows like we're gonna keep talking, but I'm gonna break stuff into two parts because we realized from our first conversation there's always just something to talk about. It something you said I don't need people to see me as this one thing forever.
Hmm.
And so like talk to me about that along with it's so clear in that moment. I keep thinking about like I didn't plan to think about this transition point so much, but it feels so like vital. You knew so deeply that it was time.
Hmm.
I know your injury played a lot into that, but also like you also didn't want it to be done that way. And yet underneath all of that, it was like I don't need people to see me as this one thing forever, even though you weren't sure quite what the next thing was.
Yeah. That's like just the toughest part is being or transitioning into a different identity of
Mm-hmm.
like how you relate to the world and how you relate to yourself. And I think looking back now, I think my career couldn't have ended any other way than that. And what was interesting about that injury is almost no one knew about it except for the people close to me and like the athletic trainers that were like treating me of
Yeah.
like the
Yeah.
dance teams didn't know that I had gotten that devastating injury because I was like right back on stage and
So
right
yeah,
the job.
yeah. Let's remind people, like just for clarification, like kind of a like little bit of what happened because I know so deeply, but just like and you mentioned in the beginning,
Yeah.
people kind of situate and understand sort of. Yeah.
Well, I definitely wanted to do Rockettes for 10 years. I thought that was like a good round number. And then on my 10th year, I was on stage just being like, could do this again. And almost to the moment, I felt like my shoulder almost slide out of its socket, which had happened before, but I could usually pop it back in, but I couldn't pop it back in. So basically, like I had to finish the number. And then as soon as I like went off stage into the wings, like I collapsed into tears. And the dance swing, who is the understudy, had to basically get into costume and finish out my show while I went to the athletic training room. And to get the shoulder put back in, I had to get an MRI to see if it was torn. And that was like really early into the season. That was in early November. Like we're just starting, like we're just out of rehearsals, basically. And so I did that whole season with my arm kinesio taped to my back, and nobody knew almost that anything was wrong.
What does that mean, kinesio taped?
So kinesio tape is, it literally looks like it's like a cloth tape. And since the Olympics are coming up, you'll see it on the Olympics. A lot of swimmers do it. So basically, it just kind of like puts things back into place. We're like, so basically, like for your arm, for example, there are ways to kinesio tape your forearm, which takes the pressure off some ligaments. I don't know the science of
No,
it.
I mean, it makes sense. And like, of course, I don't know the science either, but like you said, nobody knew anything was wrong with you. But
No.
literally, they taped your arm together. So on
Yeah.
the outside, it was literally, I'm not like making my brighter brain metaphor. Like on the outside, you looked fine. You were like use the doll, like rock, like you were taped up, like everything's good, like shiny rockette. But on the inside, like this is
Oh,
great.
totally. And what was so
Yeah.
interesting about that is like because Radio City Music Hall is so big, my kinesio tape was skin color, like my skin color. And I did the Tonight Show that year, and I couldn't wear the tape for the Tonight Show
Oh my God.
performance. Just in the back of my mind being like, what if your arm pops out? What if your arm pops out? And I I think that that performance is on YouTube. I can look back at that performance and be like, you would never know.
Wow. And so like we don't know, like everything's perfect, right? And smiling. But in your mind, mentally, you're like, my arm might pop out. And
Yeah,
also like physically, you're trained to push it all down, but like you're in extreme pain, I would imagine.
extreme pain. And the problem, all of it would come up at night when I would try to sleep, because then all of the fear that I had pushed down so that I could perform. And I felt very strongly about like giving a good performance. I felt very strongly about doing my job, like giving to the audience what they paid for, all of that work ethic. But like when I got home, it was like terrible depression. And I wouldn't be able to sleep because I had so much anxiety about something going wrong and this injury getting worse and just losing control of my body, basically. Um, and at night when I would sleep, it would slide in and out of socket.
My God.
I guess it
So
wasn't, just to get technical, I guess it wasn't like a full dislocation. I think it's called like a subluxation where it partially goes out and in.
yeah, I
I
mean,
think
it's
that
bad.
happened. It
It's
was,
bad. My God. Like, and just to again have that moment, you're on stage, it's supposed to be the end. It's the end of your 10 years as you thought it would be. And then you're thinking, or and almost to the moment,
yeah,
body is like, no.
yeah.
Yeah.
Divine redirect though, huh?
No, literally, you called it like a huge cosmic redirect last time. And it's like you can't make these things up. And
Yeah,
so for you to be doing that, and now fast forward, like you left the Rockettes, like how long ago was that?
2017. So that's like 7 years.
Yeah, so almost 10 years. So you were in it for 10 years. You've now been out for almost 10 years. And now you're in this. field, you know, so much focus on the body in a different way.
Mhm.
And so much more through like you mentioned the Pilates and all of that, and just like what a shift. And I feel like this
Yeah.
is a good point for us to end this segment. And we're going to keep talking, but we'll release this next part about authenticity and the body and like a new way to have a relationship with it
Yeah.
very soon. So
Yeah.
stay tuned, guys.